What does a winning mentality actually look like?
How long have you got? Um, I think for me, it's somebody that can perform under pressure. But I also think that it's something that's developed from a young age. I think it's really important to be able to perform when it matters, when it counts, and when there's a crowd, when there's something on the game. I think you're able to perform better than when there's nothing on the game. I always go back to when I played, and there were seasons where the season had fizzled out, and there was very few, to be honest. But a lot of the time, I found it really hard to perform, whereas the opposite became the norm for me when there was something on the game, whether it was my 500th game, whether it was Brentford when I scored in the last minute, when it was the semi-final of the playoffs when I scored a hat-trick, whether it was Wembley when we beat Leeds. Like, I almost felt like they were the games that you wanted to be involved in. But again, that didn't come from anything, in my opinion. It came from me growing up, winning things and competing at a young age, from 7 all the way through to 40. I competed to win things. Um, yeah, look at that picture. Wow.
How old are you being in this photo?
So I remember this. My granddad actually said to me, he lived over the road, and he said, look, get all your trophies together and I'll take a picture. So I reckon I was 15, 16. And I was like, Granddad, come on. Like, it's the last thing you want to do when you're 15, 16. And he said, no, I'm coming over. And he had the old camera out, and he said, line them up. This was obviously our dining room table. Lovely wallpaper. But yeah, I remember putting them all out and him taking the picture and thinking nothing of it. And then when I actually retired at 40, it's the thing that I miss the most, is competing to win. And I didn't realize and think about it until I actually retired. And it was like that feeling, chasing that feeling of winning and competing, was something that, in my opinion, got me to 40. It created longevity in my career. It allowed me to go in every day and try and win. And it wasn't just the trophy. The trophy was the outcome. It was the every single day. Like, what am I doing every day to get to that? So I knew that I had to do certain things every single day that would allow me to potentially win Player of the Season, Player of the Month, Player of the Month at Doncaster. It would allow me to get Player of the Match, Man of the Match. You go over and you get a bottle of champagne. So I knew that all these things, I was chasing that feeling. I'm not sure, and again, just off what I see, whether, if you're not in a league, if you're not competing to win, from a young age, whether we're not giving kids that opportunity to have that feeling, to taste that feeling. We speak about the three environments: school, home, and football. And at school, we potentially give them the opportunity of standing up in assembly, winning certificates, winning trophies. But I genuinely feel like creating a winning mentality is giving people the opportunity to have that feeling.
Did your parents or your granddads ever put emphasis on winning when you were younger?
Yeah, I think I did everything to win. And sometimes I've spoke about it, the pressure was too much and it got too much, and I sort of didn't want to be involved in it. But I think over time, as I got older, I started to actually really enjoy it. I remember sitting in a presentation awards night, and sitting there when they were announcing managers player of the season, players player of the season, and there were big nights where people were there, sitting there thinking, I hope this is me. I hope this is me. I hope this is me. And then all of a sudden my name wouldn't get read out. And it was like, oh my God, I'm gutted. And I felt actually like the jealous that the person that had won it had won it. So then I would almost unconsciously go, right, like, I want that feeling. And then when I was 15 or 14 or 15, I won Managers Player of the Season for Martin Juniors. And I'll never forget that feeling of getting up there, people saying, well done, James. Oh, you've had a brilliant season. Getting the certificate, getting the trophy, and then going home that night and thinking, wow, that was unbelievable. and almost laid in bed, like just buzzing, just an absolute buzz of that feeling. And that stuck with me. And, I was fortunate I played in a team that more or less won the league every season. I played in a team that won tournaments. When I was at school, I was involved with school teams that won things. And all them trophies that you see, they all have a significance. I could definitely tell you what every single trophy represented. And I could show you the first ever trophy that I received. So I think actually understanding that and almost attaching an emotion to winning something, I think it gives you a better chance of becoming a winner.
I'm interested in something you mentioned a couple of minutes ago when you spoke about um, like the longer term outcome. So the outcome being winning, but then you putting your focus and your energy into smaller actions. Have you got a process or a strategy you use for that?
Yeah, so it's something that I've developed over time, and we speak about goal setting and then breaking it down and going, right, how do you do it? Or people speak about goal setting all the time, and we speak about, I want to achieve this. So I want to get player of the season. I want to get in team of the season. I want to do this. I want to do that. And then their focus is on the outcome. So what we've developed is something where your focus is on the process. So we go process, performance, outcome. So we work backwards from the outcome. So for example, if I wanted to get in team of the season or get promoted or get, player of the season, I would then go back to, right, what do I have to hit performance wise? So I got in team of the season, I won player of the season at 36 for Doncaster. And I wrote them goals down, and then I said, right, what would I have to hit? So I'd have to get 10 goals, I'd have to get 10 assists at least. I'd have to play at least 40 games, if not 46 games, all the games in the season, to give me an opportunity of getting them outcomes. And then I go back even more to, right, what am I doing every single day to give me the opportunity to perform and get the outcome? And it's like moments like, working on your mentality, working on your on-field technical stuff, training with intensity, recovering, eating the right foods, leading by example. I'd probably have 10, 11, 12 things that I'm doing every single day that would give me that opportunity to hit my performance goals and then to hit my outcome goals.
How many footballers do you think actually do that? So working with younger players, you see an emphasis a lot of the time on the outcome rather than the process. And what I've loved, like learning through Pro Mindset, is that process approach. So every single day focusing on the things you can control rather than the things you can't control. Do you see that in football?
Yeah, again, it's brilliant because recently we've done this with 3 players over 2 years, and their outcome goals were professional contracts. And all 3 players, well, 2 of the players were professional contracts, one was a scholar. Both players have got professional contracts over 2 years, and one of them has become a scholar. And again, it was the same process. So their focus was on the outcome, and it was obvious that if you get a 2-year scholar, it's obvious that your goal is to get a professional contract. But what players don't do is their focus is never on, right, what am I doing every single day? And to shift that mindset, so to shift your thinking to, right, what am I doing every single day? Because it's obvious you're going to have poor performances. You're not going to be in the team. You're going to be up against it at times. So it's how you deal with that. It's how you recognize that. And I think if you can recognize that, and if you can shift your mindset to it, then you start to actually perform consistently well.
How important would you say it is for a young footballer to set goals and targets at the start of the season?
You just asked the question about how many young players will be doing this. I think a lot of players will be doing this unconsciously. And I think a lot of players will be doing this in different ways, putting him on the phones, having them in their minds. The amount of players that we work with where they go, yeah, I've got him in my mind, or I know what I want to achieve, or yeah, I've got it in my phone. But actually, we speak about this all the time. You're 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down, scientifically proven. So what I can never understand is if somebody says that to me, why I wouldn't write them down. So again, 42% is a is a lot. So again, what you're saying is if you write it down, if you're clear on your focus and direction, I call it, if you're clear on where you're going, I liken it to getting in the car. So you get in the car and you type in your destination to where you're going to go. What will happen is it'll route you to where you're going. If you get in your car and you don't type in your destination and you don't know where you're going, you're going to be driving around for ages trying to find out. You might end up going the wrong way. You might end up going off the path. And you might end up struggling to get to where you're going to get to. Whereas if you're clear with where you're going, if you type in the destination and there's an accident or there's roadworks, it'll reroute you exactly the same as what you can do with your goal setting. I feel like, and I don't know whether you think the same, but a lot of people won't commit to goals in case they fail, in case they don't get there.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. It's interesting. So I've been working with a young footballer recently. He's 11 years old, and his mum got in touch a couple of weeks ago and said this. So his mum's words were, he plays scared of what's going to happen if he doesn't have a perfect game. And I think it links directly into why would I set goals and why would I tell people if that just gives people an opportunity to come at me or criticise me, and when the majority of people aren't doing it, which has then been really interesting for me. If I ask you this question, Cops, if I'm the parent of a 12-year-old footballer or a 14-year-old footballer, and our outcome goal, so that footballer said, my outcome goal that I've got is I want to sign a professional contract or I want a scholarship. And we then say and start talking about process goals. What are some examples of them process goals that I can start setting? And what things should I actually be focusing on as a parent and as a player, like every single day?
And what age are you talking?
So let's say sort of 12, 13, 14.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I would be talking about if you want to be a professional footballer, and a lot of players in academies, a lot of parents of academy footballers, grassroots footballers, they want to be professional footballers. They think that it's achievable, and let's be honest, like it is achievable because so many people actually do it. So there's no sort of shame to actually wanting to achieve that. But I think we speak about all the time, like actually shrinking it down and focusing on every single day, but also focusing on long term. So you've got 4 years. If you're 12 and you want to have a scholarship, you've got 4 years to sort of spread that out. A lot can happen. You're gonna have disappointments. You're gonna have setbacks. If I use Harry Kane as an example, so Harry Kane, when he was that age, he wasn't the top of his group. I've spoke to Alex Inglethorpe, who coached him, and he said he wasn't top of his group. He wasn't the type of player that you would look at and say, right, he's going to go and do what he's gone and done. But when you listen to Harry Kane talk, and when you listen to him talk about resilience, confidence, belief, he speaks about we go again and we work even harder. So again, for me, it's about focusing on the longer term. Like what does the next 4 years look like? Not the next 4 weeks, not the next 4 days, and then almost have a plan of like adapting every single week, every single month, depending on how you're performing, how you're feeling. I think, and I'm obviously going to say this, but the way you think as a parent, the way you think as a player is the most important thing, because it's so easy to get sucked into an environment or a culture or a way of thinking that is, we need to do this, we need to do this. He needs to be there. He needs to be there. He needs to be hitting these targets. He needs to be doing this. Development is longer term, in my opinion. And even till 16, if you don't get offered a scholar, like, does that mean that you can't go on and become a professional footballer? No, it doesn't. It just means that your journey and your path changes, and that you have to, again, be clear on how you're going to get there. If you want to become a professional footballer and you're only training once a week, you're not going to get there. But if you want to become a professional footballer and you're training every day and you're doing things on your own and you're helping and getting support and working in all these areas, I think definitely there's opportunities. But goal setting for me is key.
So working the last 6, 7 years in pre-academy age groups, and seeing so many parents start the journey with their young footballers, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and then coming into academy, talent ID, pre-academy environments, and seeing how intense it becomes so quickly. I think it's so hard for parents to then be able to zoom out and see the longer term, because everything in that environment is around, trying to push you into thinking short term.
But just to stop you there, so if you're a parent and you because again, I've spoke recently to a few and they said, oh, we've literally just gone into the environment, just gone into the academy. How do you think parents sort of view the academy? How do they paint it in their minds? How would you say, if I'm a grassroots player and I go into an academy, how would I sort of paint that in my mind?
Yeah, so it's a good question, because I speak to quite a few parents who are in grassroots or coaches of grassroots teams. And for me, there's a massive misconception on what being in the academy actually means and actually is. And now I genuinely think, and the only caveat with this is it then costs money to do, where your academy sessions are free, for example, once you've signed and you're in the door, or you're training in a pre-academy, is you can create a program. And I know parents who've done it, and in my opinion, their sons aren't in an academy, but the weekly diet of what they do football-wise and sport-wise and enjoyment-wise is just as good as academy players, in terms of the time they're spending on the ball, the type of coaches they're having sessions with, the fact that they've still got space to be a kid and play out. They're competing in good leagues against other good players, because that's a massive thing in my opinion, is not just finding the best coaches to help your kid, but finding players that are going to bring them on and improve them and help them get better. And I think a lot of parents view the academy as the absolute holy grail of, this is where I've got to get to. And it's sad, because of the way the pre-academy setups are across the country, so many parents will get to 8-year-old, the sons will get to 8-year-old, and because they've not been signed by an academy, even though they've been in training, they might have been up at the training ground twice a week for the last 2 years as part of talent ID groups or in the pre-academy program, because they've not been signed, they almost get to 8-year-old and the kid's feeling like, if it's not sort of explained right, the parents thinking, my kid's not good enough. And he's 8-year-old. And statistically, if you took a percentage, he's one of the best young footballers in the area at his age. And I've always found that so frustrating in terms of the environment that's created. I think it's hard for clubs then to defend the clubs and from their point of view, because football at some point has got to be a little bit brutal, with the fact that there only is a certain amount of spaces to play in the teams. Same when you get right through to first team and you're getting players who, you have an 18-man squad or a 25-man squad and it gets cut right down. And it's even the same with younger age groups. But for a parent, that's where zooming out has got to be so important, and starting to look at, what is my child doing this week? Because all the kids, you ask them, what do you want to be when you're older? Every single kid is a footballer. Or you get a couple of astronauts or a couple of scientists, but the majority are footballers. And then I know what it's like for the parents. The parents then want to do absolutely everything they can to give their son or daughter the best possible chance of going for it, and chasing the dreams and living it. And that's where, for me, mindset, the way of thinking, becomes so important.
How can it not?
Becomes so important.
How
yeah,
can
exactly.
It not? Like, how can it, like, with what we've spoke about and what you speak about and what parents go through, like, how can it not? You can't do it without, like, working on this. And I don't mean working on it as in, like, because you have to be working on it, and there's a lot of people that work on it unconsciously without knowing and going into detail. But it has to be the most important thing, based on everything that you have to go through and experience to get there. All the trials and tribulations you need to experience, the ups, the downs, adaptability we speak about all the time, probably the biggest word and the most important attribute as a young footballer and as a parent, in my opinion.
Can I be brutally honest as well? I go out, so scouting, and I'll watch games, grassroots games, and I'll see parents putting ridiculous amounts of pressure on their young footballer, shouting at them every time they get the ball, telling them what to do. You know, like they're playing FIFA.
Yeah.
So some parents might as well be stood on the side, coaches as well, by the way, and this happens right across the board, might as well be stood on the side of the pitch with a little PS5 or Xbox controller, pressing the buttons every time the kids get the ball, because they're constantly telling them what to do. And my brutally honest thing is that I see parents putting so much pressure on their young footballers when that young footballer is 1,000,000 miles away from not just being in the academy at their age, but longer term getting to that point in their journey where they're best. So it's how you define success as well. And one of the luckiest things that ever happened in my life is when I was 15, maybe 16, I decided I was actually going to buy a book and read it myself. You know, actually look for a book. I thought, right, I've reached that age in my life now where I'm not just going to read what I have to in school. I'm going to actually go out and find something. And the first book I found was Sir Alex Ferguson's autobiography, Leading, it was called. And that book was brilliant. The biggest lesson I got from that is Alex Ferguson said he binned his slippers. He never used to wear slippers in the house because he said it made him feel like when he put his slippers on, he wasn't going to work as hard as he could. And I remember being like 15-year-old and putting my slippers in the bin and my mum saying, "What are you doing?" And I got rid of my slippers. But on the sort of the 5th or 6th page of the book, he was talking about people who've inspired him on his journey and almost give them a little shout out. And he mentioned this guy called John Wooden. And I thought, that's interesting. John, basketball coach. So I always think we talk about the best leave clues. And I thought, so I made a note and I said, right, when I finish this book, I'm going to take a look. So I got on YouTube, typed in John Wooden, watched a couple of his interviews and documentaries, and I was like, this guy is unbelievable. Bought his book then, read his book, and it is I'm not religious in any way, shape or form. That is the closest thing I've got to a Bible, you know, that I would religiously go to and read every single year. I'll read it twice a year. And John Wooden, one of the most successful coaches of all time. He was basketball coach in the 1950s in America, at the UCLA. And his definition of success was self-satisfaction in knowing that you made the effort to become the best of which you're capable. Basically, being the best version of yourself. And I heard that and I was like, oh, that is it. That is literally it. Especially as a coach working with players, it's trying to be the best possible version of yourself, because what more can you possibly do? And this is a guy, and it's really interesting to hear his players talk about him. He never mentioned winning. So we talk about winning mentality. This guy never mentioned winning, yet he won pretty much more than anyone else. Still, his records now, his unbeaten records, his seasons, a couple of seasons in a row unbeaten, are unmatched. But he never mentioned winning. And his emphasis then was all on what you talk about, the process, the things you do every single day, trying to become the best possible version of yourself. And the kids I coach now, though it's become absolutely ingrained in every single part of my life of, have your outcome goal, but just try and be the best you can possibly be every day. And what's frustrated me in football, not frustrated me, that's the wrong word, what I've seen in football that I've loved then being able to try and have an impact on, is the amount of parents and players who think that they're being the best versions of themselves and have never even looked at the mental side of the game or the way they think, for example. And it's unbelievable. And another thing John Wooden said, we could do a full episode, by the way, of me just reciting John Wooden quotes and little nuggets of advice that I've seen or read from him, was around parents and coaches on the side of a pitch when kids are younger. Parents need role models, or young people, need role models, not critics. Young people need role models, not critics. And I always saw that and I thought, it makes absolutely zero sense for me as a parent or a coach to just stand on the side of the pitch and criticise players. Especially, by the way, if you've got the cheek to criticise a player who's 10-year-old, who's doing things that you can't do now as a fully grown adult. That's cheeky. But just the way we sort of articulate ourselves to young footballers is so important. How many coaches and parents actually look at, when they're reflecting on a game, right, how many shots did my son have? What did he do good? What did he do better? Actually, what did I do good? What could I do better on the side of the pitch? Like, was my tone of voice okay? Did I contribute to my son or daughter having a good game today? By the way I was, by the way I spoke, by my body language. And these are things that I've not really heard spoken about in football. And then you speak to parents.
It's really hard. It's really hard to. So I've been a parent. I am a parent of 3 kids, 2 sons. I've been through their whole journey from under 7s all the way up to 16s, and I coach both teams at different levels. And it's really hard to try and tell a parent, and you would never tell a parent, and I would never try and tell a parent what to do. Like, you just can't do it. It's just, if you've ever been, well, when you become a parent, it's one of the hardest jobs in the world. And you do what you think is right. And a lot of the time you do what your parents did to you, or how they communicated to you, and what they did in terms of how they brought you up. So again, this is definitely not telling you what to do. When we work with parents, I think it's so important to understand it's about giving a different perspective. It's about, sharing experiences that we've had, that we see with parents and with players, with young players, and just giving parents the opportunity to take in the information. We speak about it all the time: knowledge, understanding, application. So actually taking in the information, trying to understand it and contextualize it to what's happening in their lives, and then actually apply it if they want. Because there's nothing worse than somebody preaching and trying to tell you what to do, especially with your son or daughter, and thinking they know best. So again, I just wanted to make that clear, because I feel like, although what we're saying is really, really important, I think for most parents, where do you go? I spoke to my dad the other day, and he said, what you're doing, I watched one of your episodes the other day, and what you're doing, I would have died for that information as a parent. When you signed for Newcastle, you were 17. Nobody had ever become a professional footballer out of our town. I didn't know anybody that knew anybody being a professional footballer, and I didn't know what to do. So I just sort of went along with, trusting the people at the club. But I speak to my dad about this all the time. Like, the people at the club at the time, they're technical coaches, they're physical coaches. Nobody really had my best interests at heart, because everybody's looking after themselves. And again, that is in the nicest possible way. So again, understanding the importance of getting advice, seeking information, finding out, again, what the best are doing, what gives you results, but the right results, I think is really important.
Nice photo.
Yeah, again, this was at Lilleshall, actually playing for England, representing my country. After, again, not going through an academy, not going to a school of excellence, playing grassroots all the way to 16, playing with my mates, 15, 16, Woodgarth, and then signing a YTS, 3 months into my YTS, getting an England trial, going on the England trial, scoring a hat-trick in one of the games where it didn't look like I was going to get in, eventually get in, go to Poland, and then get the opportunity to wear the England shirt, go down, represent your country with the likes of Joe Cole, Peter Crouch, Gareth Barry, Michael Carrick, some top players. And yeah, I always look at this picture and think, you know what? Like, how did that happen? How on earth did somebody go on that journey, go on that route, get rejected from Middlesbrough, Sunderland, Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, and then end up representing his country? And then I think probably a couple of months after this, I moved to Newcastle for over £1 million. Can
you talk me through this moment?
Yeah, so that was obviously coming on. I just passed him there, Alan Shearer, partnering Alan Shearer up front, making my Premier League debut. So I've been stood on the side of the pitch at St James's Park in front of 55,000. Yeah, a surreal moment, a moment that, you know, I can't really remember that much, to be honest. It was that long ago. But a moment that, you know, half of my family Newcastle supporters, half of them are Middlesbrough supporters. My grandma is from Newcastle, Prudhoe, and all my granddad's family are Middlesbrough. So it was, my cousin played for Middlesbrough, got into Middlesbrough as a YTS, and I obviously signed for Newcastle. So it was a proud moment for my family, a proud moment for my mum and dad. But again, to be stood on the side of the pitch with Sir Bobby Robson, somebody that I watched and remember going back to the 1990 World Cup, and I speak about it all the time, that this was the moment I fell in love with football. And to be stood on the side of the pitch with somebody that I watched 10 years ago, kissing his hand, going, "Don't let me down, son," patting me on the face, and giving me my Premier League debut. You know, every young person's dream to be given their Premier League debut. It's almost like, how has that happened? To fall in love with a game of football through watching somebody be so passionate, authentic, and then be in the same dressing room as him was something that I'll never be able to sort of piece together, really. But yeah, to make your Premier League debut and partner Alan Shearer, arguably one of the best strikers of all time, the Premier League's all-time top scorer, yeah, it was amazing, really.
What did you learn from that time at Newcastle? Or what's sort of your biggest takeaways now, looking back? 'Cause I know it's so hard when you're in the moment to actually experience it and see it for what it is. But looking back now, what do you think the biggest things you learned were?
I look at that picture and I look at me with my head down, like stretching. And I think, like, for everybody looking on in the stadium, you know, everybody watching, they would be thinking, wow, like, I would love to do that. I'd love to, like, experience that moment. But I was so far away from, you know, like, understanding what it took. Yes, I had technical ability. Physically, you know, I was all right, but struggled, you know, with my size, etc. And my game understanding was really good, but mentally, actually understanding, you know, how hard it was, you know, what was coming after this, I was a million miles away. So learning from this experience, never played for Newcastle again. Learning that, you know, I look back and think, you know, 5 years down the line, when I was at Doncaster working on mental performance, I wished I had that then. So I wished I was going on the pitch now, understanding that I could work on self-belief and confidence, resilience, courage, that I could be more accountable, that I could, you know, understand and learn to understand how to be consistent. But I didn't know, and I wasn't developing any of these skills, and I went the other way. I thought, you know what, I've cracked it, I've completed it. I don't have to keep working on this. I don't have to do that. You know, I've played in the Premier League. I partnered the best striker in the world. You know, I'm working with the best manager, best English manager there's ever been. And I just rode the wave, and the wave didn't last for that long because, you know, 2 years down the line, you know, I'm getting relegated out the Football League. So yeah, there's a big learning and a lot to learn, and you know, I'm not the only one that would have experienced this. But at the same time, it's one of the reasons why I do what I do and share my experiences with people.
This is a loaded question, and I'm hoping you share the story. Did you ever buy any cars while you were at Newcastle?
I've actually listened to somebody speak about this recently, but yeah, I obviously made my debut, and then I went out and bought a BMW Z3 two-seater. And in my mind, I was like not doing anything wrong. You know, I was oblivious to, you know, I've made my Premier League debut. I can do what I want. And then I drove it in the next day, and after I'd bought it, and the security guard parked me next to Bobby Robson's car, Sir Bobby Robson's car. which looked onto the training pitch. So, and I never obviously knew, and I felt guilty about driving it in and parking it next to him, because I thought this isn't going to work well for me if he sees it and sees me in it. Anyway, I got out of it and nobody saw me in it. So then I ended up going onto the training pitch, and at Chesley Street where we trained, there was a running track and then a little car park. As we're running around warming up, I could see the gaffer pointing over to my car. And then as we ended up getting round to him, he said, like, whose car's the little BMW? And I sort of put my hand up, and he absolutely annihilated me. Like, who do you think you are? Like, my son, he's working in a factory 9 till 5, and you've made one appearance, and you think you can do what you want, and you think you're this and you think you're that. And like, looking back at the time, I was like, oh my God, like, what is he on about? Because I was oblivious of it. But then looking back now, I was like, he's absolutely spot on. So I remember
What did you do with the car?
Well, every time I got in the car, I just felt like, I felt guilty that I didn't deserve to be in the car. Ended up selling it. But yeah, it's again another experience. I hear a few people tell stories of different managers and different people. When they make the debut, getting sort of feeling like that and getting put under pressure. And I definitely didn't feel and didn't see it coming, because I was oblivious. Nobody was telling me. Nobody was, or maybe I was thinking or wasn't letting it in. I don't know. But again, I would never buy a car again like that if I was put in that situation.
Just how good of a manager was Sir Bobby?
Again, as I got older, I sort of, and this is the ironic thing and the bit that makes me feel really bad, to be honest, that my dad used to say to me, do you realise where you are? Do you realise the opportunity that you've got? Do you realise who you're surrounded by? And I used to say to him, Dad, like, stop it. Like, I'm just playing football. I'm just, going to training every single day. And I'd sort of like just excused it and didn't really think about it. And then when he actually released me, when I left Newcastle, I was really bitter, and played the victim, blamed everybody else, including him. I remember reading an article that I did, and it was like almost like not taking accountability for my actions, for where I was. And it made me feel like, Jesus, how do you get to that point as a young player? How do you get so cosseted and so, like, you think you're better than everybody else, and you think that you know best at not 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. It's like, yeah, it's really, really sad. But at the time, he was one of the best. Ruud Gullit was the manager, and then, he'd sort of, I think Duncan Ferguson, Rob Lee, Stuart Pearce, Alan Shearer, he'd put them on the bench, and I think a couple of them were training with the 21s, training with us. And then when Sir Bobby came in, he showed an absolute masterclass of how to get everybody on side, how to make all the best players, the more senior players, feel special. How to get them players coming in, like, with big smiles on their faces. Kieran Dyer, people that, he knew that was his skill, that was his superpower. He knew how to make people feel special. And obviously since then, as I've got older, I've sort of started to understand how important that is, and how good he actually was. Watched documentaries about him, and the best story for me is I left Newcastle, and 5 years later, when I ended up at Doncaster, we had a mutual friend who was playing for the club, whose dad was goalkeeper coach at Newcastle. And I remember Ben Smith coming in and saying to me, my dad spoke to Sir Bobby yesterday, and he was asking about you. He was asking after you. He was asking, I was little Coppy getting on. He used to call me little Coppy son, little centre forward. And he said I was little Coppy getting on, and he was asking after you. And I was like, oh my God, like, how does he even remember who I am? But the fact that he did that, the fact that, he cared about players, whether you were in the first team, whether you weren't, the fact that he made you feel 10 foot tall when you were only 5'7", was unbelievable. And they're the things that stick with me. I remember watching his documentary, and he would send flowers to people year after year after year after year after year when they'd left the club. And I was thinking, yeah, that's exactly, I had that experience with that. So again, like you say, with your stories and the people that inspired you, he was definitely somebody that down the line has inspired me. His love and authenticity and his enthusiasm at 67. I remember partnering him in pre-season. I went with the first team and I didn't have a partner, and he partnered with me. So he was like, you come with me. So he would be doing burpees and sit-ups and press-ups with me, and I'd be counting. The lads would be laughing because he'd be doing all these things at 67, 68-year-old, and I would have to start counting and try and keep a straight face. But it was like, that's what made you warm to him. That's what made you love him. That's what made you want to be part of what he was doing at Newcastle. And I absolutely sort of look back with unbelievable memories. Even there, sort of like kissing his hand and patting me on the face and saying, "Don't let me down." I obviously let him down. I didn't play for Newcastle again, and I always tell that story. But them words, them moments, having that and been around him was just special. Every single moment.
So you left Newcastle after a couple. How old were you when you actually left Newcastle
I was 21. Yeah, I had a year left of
and
my contract.
moved to Exeter?
Yeah, so I had a year left of my contract, and I decided to move to Exeter. Yeah.
What was it like when you first signed for Doncaster?
Yeah, signing for Doncaster was a dream come true for me in terms of moving back up north, moving into League One. I remember speaking to the manager when I went up to sign and saying, what, they just got promoted out of League Two into League One, and it was like, what's the difference between, I've just sort of been in part of a losing mentality. Like, what's the difference? Why have you been so successful? And he was straight away spoke about the togetherness, again, the winning mentality. We've got winners. And as soon as I went in and experienced it, you could tell, the group was completely different. The willingness to push, the intensity in training every single day. And it's the thing that I've noticed throughout all the teams that I've been a part of that have been winners, that have gone on and won things, is, sessions every single day are intense. People push each other. People are smashing each other. People are arguing, like competitive arguing. And it's constant. And it's something that I saw when I first moved to Doncaster, and something that, again, I tried to emulate and sort of incorporate into my sort of everyday.
We had a weird way of history sort of repeating itself a couple of weeks ago, where I'd spoke to you and I said, I've been working with this player cop, said, look at this, what his dad sent me. And he sent me a video, it was a Sunday night. And do you know what I'm going to say?
Yeah.
Of the penalty. So I'd been mentoring and doing some off-field coaching with this young footballer, 11 years old. And his probably about a month ago, we did a session together, online like this, just talking. And he said that he'd been in a tournament and it went to penalties, and he didn't put his hand up to take one because he felt nervous, was worried what had happened, what people would say if he missed. And the kid was really honest about it, spoke about it, said, yeah, that's how I was feeling. His dad said he was gutted because the dad was the coach of the team as well. Like when he looked round and his son didn't put his hand up, but he didn't want to put pressure on him, but he was gutted, that he hadn't sort of got out of his comfort zone and put his hand up. And then we'd done a session talking about it and looking at strategies of how you can get out your comfort zone as a young footballer, and explaining and looking at what pressure actually is and how you can perform even with pressure, and how you can, every time you step onto a football pitch and every time you leave it, have no regrets in the things that you can control. And yeah, I did the session, thought no more of it, and then 2 weeks later got a video sent through on a Sunday night. I'm going to show. I'll find the video. And this kid, it got to penalties, the game, in a tournament again. And his dad said, we've come in, right, lads, who wants to take one? He said his hand was the first one up. And then how about this? So he's then had to take one. He's gone, I think, fifth. So he said, I'll take the last one, hopefully the winner. It turned out to be the penalty that he had to score it to keep his team in it. Otherwise, they were losing the final. He's then took the penalty, rifled it top corner, then took another one for the chance to win when it's gone back round in sudden death. I'll play it like that. Scored it. And I thought it was unbelievable, Cops, because when I was telling you that, you were laughing. And you had something very similar in your journey, didn't you, when you were younger?
Yeah. Obviously, exactly the same experience. So when we've spoke about it, and again, it doesn't matter whether, how old was he?
11.
So whether you're 11 or whether I think I was 23, 24, it's the same experience. So I would not put my hand up for a penalty because I was scared of missing. And I had these conversations with the mentor that I was working with at the time, and he had exactly the same conversation about, what is it? And I was like, yeah, I'm just scared that, it makes me even feel nervous, even thinking about taking a penalty. But he said, and then we went through some strategies. We did it the afternoon before the Man City game. So we played Man City in the cup. We didn't know, obviously, it was going to go to penalties, but he said, if it happens, would you take one? And I said, no. And then he said, right, we'll walk through some strategies. We did it in the boardroom and we went through it. And then that night, after I'd done that, it went to penalties. And I'd not scored for Doncaster. And the manager at the time, Dave Penny, said, right, it's gone to penalties. Who wants a penalty? And I put my hand up. And he looked at me as if to say, oh my God, I'm not sure I even want to give you a penalty. But anyway, he gave me a penalty.
James Coppinger. Doncaster leading 1-0 and 2-0. Well, it looks like Doncaster have been doing some extra training.
So the ironic thing about that is, he said it looks like Doncaster have been doing some extra training, and they presume that you're kicking the ball into a goal. That is the extra training. But the extra training was, again, understanding a strategy to walking up, so getting the ball, walking up, putting the ball down. And obviously England have done it loads and worked out that it's not technical, it's mental performance, it's how you do it in your mind. And I did it, and I worked on it. I picked a side, took a breath, walked back and scored. And bear in mind, David James was in goal, England's number one at the time. You're playing against Man City, and there's, I don't know what was there, 15,000 there at Bellevue. So when you obviously told me that story the other day, I'm like, it's unbelievable. Like, people recognizing it, understanding the power of being able to think like that and to put your hand up and then take responsibility. And then, from then on, I could then go and take penalties. I could experience that, and I've had success with that. So, and then I could go and action it in different ways as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's the thing I've started to love most about what we do as off-field coaches and mentors, is helping give young footballers and the parents control over their own games.
Yeah.
And helping them start to feel like they can take complete ownership of everything they do, and they can enjoy it, and they can be present in it, in everything they do. They can be present, and they can try things, and they can have success, they can have disappointments, but it all, because they're working on the mindset and the way that they think, it's all a positive experience for them.
Yeah. I would go back, I would rewind. So I would go, and this is where I look at it now, is go, imagine that I never met and worked on this. So go back. So go back to that. So anybody want a penalty, I wouldn't have put my hand up. So I wouldn't have scored that goal. That goal allowed me to build confidence and belief and move forward and get better. And then I go even further and go all the little things that I've done over sort of 17, 18 years after working on this. If I hadn't have done them things, I wouldn't be sat here. I wouldn't have become a professional footballer for 23 years. I wouldn't have gone on and had successes. I wouldn't have, done the things I've done. If I hadn't started working on this consciously. Yes, you can work on it unconsciously, and yes, you can have good performances, and yes, you can become professional footballers and do really good things without it. But actually doing it makes you, again, we spoke about it right at the beginning, it gives you the opportunity of becoming the best version of yourself. It makes you and gives you the best opportunity of fulfilling your potential. And that's the way I view it now. It's like, imagine not doing it. Imagine if you're a player sat watching this, or a parent watching this, and you don't know that this exists, and that your child is struggling in certain areas and needs to improve in certain areas, and you don't know how to do it. Imagine that you're not finding out how to do it, and they're not having these opportunities and living these experiences. And again, I feel like that is a really good way of looking at it, and probably a way that not many people will look at it.
Yeah, 100%. And if you could wrap up the last 51 minutes in a sentence or two of key takeaways, we always talk about to the kids when we're doing coaching sessions together, of like, what's one thing you take away? Put it in your pocket, remember it. What's the one or two things, Cops, from today? If parents watching this would only remember them two things, what would you like them to be?
I think I just spoke about it there. I think, and I say this every time, is find out how. We speak about self-belief, we speak about confidence, we speak about all these things. You hear the buzzword, you hear mindset, you hear mentality. But actually, how many people teach you how to improve it and develop it? It's something that we pride ourselves on. So find out how, listen to more things, go and experience and come out of your comfort zone and do things that you wouldn't normally do. I remember Terry saying that to me. In order to get a different result, you have to do something different. And it was like, oh my God, he's spot on, because I've expected things to change and get better, and I've not done anything different. I keep doing the same thing over and over again. I know it's obviously the definition of insanity, but you've got to do something different. And the amount of players and parents that come to us and almost step out of their comfort zone and go, you know what, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna reach out to them, or I'm just gonna watch something, or I'm gonna watch a YouTube video. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna buy the book. Is unbelievable. So I for me think that is the biggest takeaway. And it isn't a natural thing to do. So it's not a natural thing to do for players and parents. I was at an academy game yesterday, and I look around and I think, how many of these parents and players actually know that this exists, and how many of them actually would sit down and work on off-field coaching? And there'd be a very, very few. But for me, the ones that are doing it, I know ones that are doing it are getting the best result.
Yeah, 100%. Cops, pleasure as always.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks for your time.
So I heard a dog in the background.
Yeah, that's Bobby wanting his breakfast. The last thing I'll give everyone just a little behind the scenes before we go, if that's all right, Cops.
Yeah. So
last week we finished this call, press stop, and the one rule is you've got to keep your laptop open. Just only takes 10 minutes, just to make sure it all uploads properly, so we can put it live. Yeah, Cops, we'll do that. I won't say any more, but we'll leave our laptops on here.
Yeah. Love it.
Top man.
Cheers, Len.
Yeah, see you soon.
See you, mate.
Bye.